There is a country in Africa with more pyramids than Egypt. Not fewer. More. They stand in the deserts of Sudan, in their hundreds, steep and narrow and strange. And most people who love ancient Egypt have never heard of the kings buried beneath them. Those kings did something no history book can quite bring itself to shout about. For about 100 years, all of Egypt, the temples, the priesthood, the throne of the pharaohs, was ruled by a line of kings from the south, from a land Egypt had once looked down on. We call them the 25th Dynasty. Popular history calls them the Black Pharaohs. That name is doing a lot of work, and before we go further, we have to be honest about it. So keep it in mind. We will come back to it. First, who they actually were, and where they came from. To the south of Egypt, up the Nile, past the first great rapids we call the Cataracts, lay a kingdom the Egyptians called Kush. Its heartland is in what is now Sudan. For long stretches of history, Egypt had dominated Kush, occupied it, taxed it, built temples across it. And in doing so, Egypt exported its own gods and its own writings south, so that by the time our story begins, the people of Kush were not strangers to Egyptian ways. They had made those ways their own. They worshipped Amun, the great hidden god of Thebes, with a devotion that was, if anything, fiercer than Egypt's own. They wrote in hieroglyphs. They built temples in the Egyptian style. Their holy center was a flat-topped mountain called Jebel Barkal, which they believed was a home of Amun himself. So when the Kushite kings finally turned north, they did not come as foreign invaders smashing a culture. They came, in their own eyes, as its rescuers. Because by them, Egypt was a mess. The old, single kingdom of the pharaohs had broken apart into rival cities and warlords, each with its own strong men, each calling himself great. It was weak, divided, and ripe for the taking. Into that mess rode a Kushite king named Piye. Around 2,700 years ago, Piye swept north out of Kush and down the Nile, taking city after city, until the divided lords of Egypt bowed to him. And then, he did something a conqueror rarely does. He wrote it all down in detail, and carved it on a great stone stela back home at Jebel Barkal. It is one of the most vivid war accounts to survive from the ancient world. And it tells us exactly how Piye wanted to be seen, not as a raider after gold, but as a pious king restoring the proper worship of Amun to an Egypt that had let its faith fall into chaos. Here we have to be careful for the first time. That holy motive is real, but remember whose words we are reading. They are Piye's own, on Piye's own monument. It is how he chose to explain himself. Historians see the other half of the picture too. A powerful united kingdom in the south, and a rich splintered Egypt to the north that could no longer defend itself. Faith and opportunity, pointing the same way. Whatever the true mix of reasons, the result was the same. The kings of Kush now wore the crown of Egypt, and they wore it their own way. Look closely at their statues, and you find a small, deliberate signal. Not one cobra rearing on the royal brow, the way Egyptian kings had worn it for 2,000 years. 2 cobras. A quiet way of saying we are kings of 2 lands. Kush and Egypt. Ours by right. They also reached backwards in time. When their sculptors carved a king, they did not copy the art of the weak dynasties just before them. They reached back thousands of years to the crisp, powerful style of the old pyramid age and revived it. It was a message in stone. We are not a break from the great past. We are its true heirs. The greatest of them took that idea and built it into the sky. His name was Taharqa. Under Taharqa, the Kushite Empire reached its height. It stretched from the deep heart of Sudan all the way to the shores of the Mediterranean. One of the largest empires the Nile Valley had ever seen. He built everywhere. But his boldest mark was left in the holiest place in Egypt. At Karnak, the vast temple of Amun at Thebes, Taharqa raised a towering colonnade in the very first court. A single column of it still stands today. A king from Sudan, leaving his signature at the sacred center of Egypt. For a moment, it must have looked permanent. A Nubian dynasty, secure on the throne of the pharaohs. richer and more devout than the rulers it had replaced. But far to the northeast, another empire was rising, and it was hungrier and crueler than anything Egypt had faced in centuries. The Assyrians, masters of iron, of siege, and of terror. In the year we call 671 BCE, the Assyrian king Esarhaddon smashed into Egypt and took the great city of Memphis. Taharqa was wounded, and members of his own family were carried off into captivity. Taharqa was tough. The moment the Assyrians turned their backs, he took Memphis again. But it was a fight the Kushites could not win for long. Under Esarhaddon's successor, Ashurbanipal, the Assyrians came back, again and again. And around the year 663 BCE, they did the unthinkable. They marched all the way south to Thebes, the sacred city itself, and sacked it, looted its temples, carried its treasures back to Assyria. It was a wound Egypt never forgot, and it broke the Kushite hold for good. The kings of Kush pulled back south, out of Egypt, home to where they had come from, and that could have been the end of them. A short, brilliant century, and then gone. It was not the end, not even close. Back in their homeland, the Kingdom of Kush lived on for nearly 1,000 more years. Its center later shifted further south still, to a city called Meroe. And there, in the Sudanese desert, those kings and queens did something their Egyptian teachers had abandoned long before. They built pyramids. Egypt had stopped raising pyramids for its kings something like 800 years earlier. The Kushites revived the whole idea and made it their own. Steeper, narrower, smaller, but crowded together in their hundreds. At El Karu, at Nuri, at Meroe, field after field of them rose over the royal dead, which is how we arrive back at where we started. There are today, in the deserts of Sudan, more than 200 ancient pyramids, more than survive in all of Egypt, built by kings most people have never heard of. And that brings us at last to the harder question. Why have you never heard of them? Part of the answer is old and simple. Being conquered by outsiders was not a thing later Egyptians liked to dwell on. So their own records grew quiet about the century they spent under the kings from the south. Embarrassment more than any grand conspiracy. But the heavier silence is much more recent, and it is ours. When European and American archaeologists first uncovered these Nubian sites, 100 years ago, some of them simply refused to believe what they were seeing. The most influential of them looked at a sophisticated African kingdom with its temples and its pyramids, and concluded that dark-skinned Africans could not have built it themselves. It must, he decided, have been the work of some lighter-skinned outsiders. That was not ancient prejudice. It was modern prejudice, written into the first histories of Kush, and it took generations of later scholars to dig it back out. And this is where we have to keep our own promise, and come back to that name. The Black Pharaohs. It is a powerful phrase, and it corrects a real wrong, the long refusal to credit African kings for an African achievement. But it is also a modern label. The ancient Egyptians did not sort the world by skin color, the way the last few centuries have. To an Egyptian, the line that mattered was not black or white. It was Egyptian or not Egyptian. Did you honor the right gods, speak the right rights, rule in the right way? And by that measure, the kings from Kush were not outsiders playing at being pharaohs. They were, in their own eyes and in their deeds, more devoutly Egyptian than the divided lords they replaced. Africans ruling Egypt and claiming to be its truest heirs. They ruled the oldest kingdom on earth. They outbuilt it in pyramids. And then history, ancient and modern both, did its best to look away. The stones in the Sudanese desert are still standing there, waiting for anyone who cares to look back.